Welcome, everybody, and this is Gihan Pereira here. I want to talk about disruption by design, and one particular aspect of that, and I'll explain what that phrase means, but I'll also look at this particular aspect, which is all about scanning the environment. And I picked this picture because I think we're all moving into the future, and the future, in a lot of ways, is a little bit foggy and misty and a little bit uncertain. And the organizations, the teams, the leaders who are successful in the future are those who can navigate through that and not necessarily see a clear future, but be able to navigate through a foggy future as well. And I want to show you some ways that you can get a little bit of clarity, but also recognize that you're never going to get 100% clarity about the future. We're just moving in a world that we're living in a world that's just moving so fast now that we'll never know what's ahead of us. But it does help if we can scan the environment and understand a little bit about what's coming up ahead. So I know there are some people on this webcast who know me and quite well because they booked me to speak at their events or been in my audiences or come to previous webcasts. But there are some people who haven't, who don't know me either. So this is me, Gihan Pereira. I've worked with a number of companies around Australia, New Zealand, around the world, talking about how to be fit for the future. So I do a lot of work speaking at conferences, running workshops, doing strategic planning, and running these sort of webcasts. And the big news for me, and I'm really excited about this, woohoo, is that I've just published my new book, Disruption by Design, hence the title of this webcast today. And it's all about, as you can see the subtitle there, leading the change in a fast-changing world. And I'll explain what that phrase, disruption by design, means for you in a couple of minutes, because it's really how our world is changing now. We hear a lot about disruption, and a lot of people think that disruption is just going to happen to us and there's nothing we can do about it. And that's not true. You can disrupt and disrupt your team, your organization, even your whole industry, and you can do it by design. And the processes that we're going to work through today are a couple of the processes that I talk about in the book. If you'd like to get a copy of the book, well, yeah, today's your lucky day, because for all the people who turned up here in the middle of between Easter and Anzac Day and in this school holiday period around a lot of the country in Australia, I've got a little reward for you. If you complete the exit survey at the end of today's webcast, then I'll send you a PDF downloadable copy of the book, the full book, unabridged and complete. So you'll get a copy of the book if you just hang around to the end and complete the exit survey as you leave. I'll make sure that we send you a copy of that, that book. Okay, so what's changed in the world, and what does this mean for us in terms of what we need to do as leaders, and what does it mean for us in terms of disruption? So I think most businesses go through these three growth phases, and it's always been the same. It's just that it's accelerated now. It's got a lot faster, and it's getting faster and faster. So typically, a business or an organization starts by finding a problem that people have in the world. And they figure out there are enough people in the world to solve that problem. So they strive, so they hire people with the skills who can help solve their problem, and they strive really hard and they succeed at solving the problem for those customers with the problem. So you can see here that there's a growth phase to the business, and then it starts to level off. Because what happens then is not that the business becomes, that the people become dumber or the business becomes slower, although the business sometimes does get slower because things get in the way of success. And so it becomes, you get mired down in processes and checklists and government regulations and so on. But it doesn't have to be that way. What typically happens is that customers have different problems now, or different customers come along and they've got a different set of problems. So some of the problems might be the same and you're skilled in solving them, but some of them have changed. And now you've got a different set of problems that you're solving for possibly a different set of customers. And this is where organizations struggle, because now they're struggling to survive because they've got this talent. They've got these talented people that know how to solve problems of the past. So the only way to thrive is if you've got people who are now, if your organization can solve the problems of the future, which means you need people with those talents and skills to solve those problems for the future. It doesn't mean you need a new set of people, but it does mean that those people need to be reskilled, or sometimes you do need some new people as well to be able to solve those problems. And this is the difference between disruption and innovation. So innovation is where you've got the right match between the people and the problems that you're solving, and the organization facilitates your people solving those problems. That's innovation. Disruption happens when this arrow goes in the other direction, when you don't change from the inside, when you have people who are maybe really skilled people, but they're no longer solving the problems that the world needs solved now. So the way ahead, the secret for success in the future for organizations is these three things. So have some foresight so you can look into the future and get some feeling for what's coming up ahead. And have the talented people who can solve the problems that your customers and clients and stakeholders want solved. And then, of course, you take action. And those three things, foresight, talent, and action, are exactly the three parts of my new book, Disruption by Design. It's in three parts, and there are 9 broad chapters. There's 3 around foresight, 4 around talent, and 2 around action. So this is the blueprint for the future. If you want to be solving problems and successful in the future, then do this and be really good. And what happens when you use these 3 things? When you've got foresight, you've got the right talent, and you're ready to take action, your decision making improves. And I talked to lots of organizations and audiences about decision making. So let's do a little quick poll here. And what I'd like to know is what's your decision making culture? So what's your organization's decision-making culture? And I'm going to group this into 4 areas because I think most people and most organizations fall into one of these 4 areas. So the one, which I don't think most people here are on this webcast, otherwise you wouldn't have turned up on this webcast, is a resistant culture. So you don't know what's happening, you don't really care, you don't want to be involved, and you either completely ignore it, or you know it's there and you resist it. You leave it to somebody else to solve the problems, and you've got this resistant culture, so you don't want to make a decision ever, even if you know that you should. The second kind, which I think is quite common, even though it's not very productive and not very useful, is impulsive. So these are the people who say a fast decision is a good decision, but that's not always the case. So sometimes making a fast decision is a rash decision or a reckless decision because you haven't taken time to use foresight to understand the consequence of that decision or to think about other decisions you could have made. The opposite of that, which also is common, especially in established businesses, is the people who never want to make a decision because there's so many choices. They want to do more research. There's always one more study they could do. They could always put it off till tomorrow. So they're hesitant about making a decision. The exact opposite of the impulsive people. Impulsive people don't wait to get enough information. The hesitant people wait for more information, and then the world passes them by. Obviously, the best one are the people who are decisive, who combine those 2 positive traits. So they don't wait forever to make a decision, so they're reasonably quick about making decisions, but they also don't wait. They also wait till they get enough information, so they can use foresight to be able to make an effective decision and a well-informed decision. So if I asked you, what is your organization's decision-making style, broadly speaking, let's launch this as an anonymous poll, and we'll see what people in the room say. Okay, so if you haven't done the polls before, it's very easy. It's anonymous. Just choose one of the answers, and this is for your organization. So not necessarily for you, but your organization. So we'll see the results. Oh, thank you. People are voting very quickly. Thank you for that. Okay, so I usually wait till 80% of people have voted, and that's happened now. So I'm going to stop the poll after another 3 seconds. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, you see the results on the screen now. And actually, this is pretty typical. So most people, when they talk about their organization, they say their organization falls into one of these 2 middle categories. Actually, it's quite, in this group, it's quite heavily weighted towards the hesitant, slow to act, which is really interesting because usually I find that those 2 middle options are pretty equal. So some organizations are impulsive, some organizations are hesitant, but it typically is shared between them. But you can see here the lion's share share goes to the hesitant, slow to act. Good. So what I want to share with you today are some tools that will help you make better decisions, because you'll be able to scan the environment a bit more. Now, because a lot of people in the room say the organization is slow to act, I don't want this to be something that's going to make it even slower. So my goal, and I hope that your goal of this webcast, is you go away with some tools that will help people make decisions faster, because they're a little bit better informed. So if you're in this hesitant, then I'd like it to be to help you to be better informed in making decisions in the future. Okay, let me hide that poll, and actually let's do the next poll straight away, because I want to show the results of some research that was done a few years ago for around Australian companies. And Australian CEOs were asked, where will your biggest competition come from in the next 3 years? And I'm actually going to run this as a poll, so I'm going to ask you, where do you think? Because there's some really strong leaders here, and there are people who are in leadership positions in the organization. Let me ask you, where do you think your biggest competition will come from in the next, in the near future, in the next 3 years? So I'm going to give you one of 4 choices, which is what Accenture asked these CEOs, and interested to see what people say here in the room, and then we'll see what the Accenture results showed. Okay, good. I think we've got about more than half have voted. I'm getting up to 80%. Okay, good. Most people have voted, so I'm now going to stop the poll and share the results. Yeah, so this is really interesting, and I'm really pleased to see that there is a mix, and I'm pleased to see, hold on, let me just make sure I've got the results coming up. Yep, and I'm pleased to see that the highest results are people who say that the biggest competition is actually going to come from outside your industry. So if you said that, then you probably got a reason for saying that. But if you didn't, just think about that. That we've got more than half the people, in fact, 2/3 of the people here, say that the competition in the future is not going to come from the industry. So it's not necessarily from existing companies in the industry or from startups, but it's actually going to be from outside the industry. And I think that, so I'm really pleased about that, because I think what we're going to talk about in the next half hour is going to be very relevant for you, because we're going to talk about looking outside your business, outside your industry. But I'm also really pleased to see that people are saying that the competition is going to come from outside. Let me show you what the Accenture results showed. Okay, so Accenture, when they did this poll, and I've put the report here, because you can download the report if you want to read it in detail, but you can look at the report here, is Australia at a technology tipping point, and they were talking about competition, and they asked CEOs, what do you think the biggest threats for your industry are going to be? In other words, where's the competition going to come from? And most CEOs, well, let me show you the results. So most CEOs said existing companies within their industry, and then it went down. So there's a kind of the two in the middle were even, and then 18% said startup companies outside. I reckon this group here on this webcast are a little bit more savvy than that, because if this is true, if CEOs absolutely do believe that the competition is going to come from the traditional competitors, then I think the organizations are in a lot of trouble. And what I do is that when I go around and do strategic planning or workshops for senior leadership teams, I tell them this, the competition is actually going to come from outside. It's actually the two things that you, the people on this webcast, identified. It's going to be companies outside your industry. They could be existing or startup, or they're going to be startup companies within your industry who don't have the experience, but they also don't have the baggage of, as I showed you before, solving problems of the past. Okay, so with that as a backdrop, let's look at scanning the environment. So I love this quotation from Tolkien. And he says, if there's a live dragon living near you, then excuse me, then don't leave him out of your calculations. And this is what we're looking at here. So we're looking at, if you're thinking about the future, how do you prepare for the future, knowing that there are some dragons over the horizon in the misty, foggy regions that you can't see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 3 tools that I use when I go in and work with organizations and I do strategic planning with them and future planning with them. So one of them is this PESTLE analysis. Then we'll do, I'll also show you scenario planning a little bit later, and then I'll mention, but we won't do the third one of them, because given the limited time on this webcast, rather than do all three of them at a very superficial level, what we'll do is we'll spend most of our time doing this one, and then we'll dip our toes in the other one. I'll mention the third one just in passing, just to explain what it is and what you can do as a next step. If you want to do it with your own team, or obviously if you want to engage me to come and help you with it as well. So PESTLE analysis is a tool that futurists have been using for a while. It hasn't always been called PESTLE. The very first version of it I saw was called STEP, because it only had four things that they looked at. So it is STEP. You'll see a lot of people even now using STEEP. So they call it STEEP analysis. And now, I call it PESTLE because we look at 6 factors from outside your organization, your industry, that could affect it. Okay, so you'll see people using STEP and STEEP, and you can say, you're a little bit behind, Kihan. But anyways, PESTLE analysis looks at these 6 factors outside your organization that could affect its future. So if you think that we're all moving into the future, and we've all got a one-way ticket into the future, there are things around us that are going to affect how our future plays out. Obviously, there are things that we can do internally as well, but it's quite useful for us to know what's happening outside. So PESTLE is an acronym, and it stands for these 6 things: political factors, environmental, social, so this is all about people, technology, which a lot of people talk about, but as you'll see from today, technology is not the be-all and end-all, and it shouldn't be the only thing that you think about. Then there are legal, so there are regulations and laws and so on, and economic factors, so macro, micro, global, national, and so on. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a little bit of an exercise. So I don't have very many more slides in this presentation because we're going to make this quite interactive. So we're going to take one example. So when I go in and work with organizations, obviously I work with their organization, so we do the PESTLE analysis for their organization. I did this with a local government, a local council recently that's quite forward thinking, and they said, look, we've already got our planning for the next 10 years, but what do we need to think about for the next 15 to 20 years? And we did PESTLE analysis, and they looked at these 6 factors and how it's going to affect their organization, and then we did some strategy work to figure out what priorities and how they should allocate the work, to start thinking about that even now. So we're going to do this 6 factors, but we're going to do it on just one. So I know the group here is quite diverse. So I have got here 3 options for you. I've actually got 4 options. So the 3 options are, we can take an example of a private hospital, and I've just picked these 3 options because these are 3 groups that I've worked with recently, so I can, know some of the, I'm familiar with some of the things that are going to affect their organizations. But I work with a lot of industries as well, so if we don't pick one of these 3, that's okay. I'm happy to keep working with the others as well. So we can pick a private hospital. So in other words, we're representing a private hospital, and we're going to do this PESTLE analysis. We can pick an airport. I've done some work with Perth Airport actually, and also with CASA, which is a regulator, but we'll take the airport side of it. Or we can do a local council, or I'm happy to work with your business as well, or your organization. So what I'd like you to do, I'm not going to do this as a poll, but I'm going to ask you in the question box if you can vote for one of these: hospital, airport, or council. Or if you really, really want me to use your industry as an example, your business as an example, type in your business name, and I'll read out, and I might choose that one. Okay, so go ahead now. If you're just in the question box, type in what your preference is, and we'll use this for the example. So we've got one says local council, hospital. Okay, one person says hospital because I know she works in the industry. Okay, so hospital's winning at the moment. Okay, a couple for airport, but it looks like hospital. Okay, so hospital is going to be the one that we'll work on. Okay, and I specifically said private hospital here because in Australia and many other countries, the private hospital system and the public hospital system are quite different. So it's not necessarily about technology and healthcare, it's also about, with the private hospital, you're thinking about, obviously, private hospitals have patients, but of course, I shouldn't say of course, but private hospitals also, their customers might be the surgeons and the doctors who have rooms in those hospitals. One of their major stakeholders is the health insurance funds, because people with private health insurance are going to use the private hospitals, and so on. So some of their challenges and some of the things in their future are very different from public hospitals. We could have chosen public hospitals as well, but let's go with private hospital. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through these 6 things, and we're going to do this PESTLE analysis. Excuse me. We're going to do this PESTLE analysis using the example of a private hospital, and we're going to do it together. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes to do this little exercise here. So it's good. I set aside a lot of time in this webcast for us to do this. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to use this shared workspace, this shared online workspace. Now, obviously, if I was in a workshop with all of you in the room, I'd get you working at tables, and you'd work together with your individual ideas and group ideas, share them on a flip chart at the front of the room, and so on. We don't have that environment set up here. So I've got the next best thing, which is askgihan.com. So if you can please go to your web browser and just go to askgihan.com, and let me open up that window in my web browser as well. Okay, so you should come to a page like this. Don't do anything with it just yet, please, but here's what we're going to do. So when I ask you to contribute, all you do is you click this little plus button here, or you can actually even double click anywhere on the screen and type in your comments. So the way it's going to work is this. So let me demonstrate this first. So when you type it in, put your name at the top, but you don't have to. If you just like to keep it anonymous, that's fine, no problem at all. And then your comment. So you type title, okay, and a comment. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to start this off, but let's do political first. Okay, let's do political first. So if you've got a comment, this is maybe not going to work, but okay, so if you've got a comment that you think there's some political aspects that are going to affect the way that private hospitals have to think about their future, then add a note in here. Okay, so actually let me do all 6 of them for you so we can do all of them. So political, environmental, social, technological, legal. Actually, can I suggest that the way we do this is in these little things, add your comment. So Elaine, instead of creating a new one, if you've got something that you can add, can you add comment? I'm pretty sure I've set it up so you can add your comment. So add your comment in here. Yeah, okay, great. So perfect, just like this. So government intervention, the insurance space. Yeah, so this is, we're talking about private health insurance, and I'm just going to delete Elaine's one here. Excuse me, Elaine. Yeah, public-private ratio, absolutely. So this is political. Things like if there are any changes to healthcare at all, Medicare, Mediscare, coming up to a federal election, those are the sort of things that are going to change it. Then what about the others? And by the way, feel free to add to any one of these areas. Are there any sort of environmental issues? Environment, you can think of it as in terms of carbon, climate change if you want to, but also the broader environment if you want to. So social, yeah, aging population will cause more demand, pressure on private hospitals regarding service levels, absolutely. So technological, so there may be things like new technology in wards, e.g. the Da Vinci, let's just say new technology, Da Vinci machine, autonomous trolleys, and so on. Okay, great. A black swan event. Yeah, public outrage. Yeah. So black swan events are events which are come completely out of the blue, which can't be predicted, and it's not there's a build up to them at all. It's just that there's some major event which is a black swan event. Yeah, and there's some risk aversion reaction to that. Okay, what else have we got? People's inability to afford private health insurance will mean less customers choosing private. Exactly. Yeah. So we're looking at patients here. This private healthcare becomes unaffordable. Sustainability. Yeah, robo healthcare, some technology around that. So let me add another one to this one then. Another one is patients want to act like customers. Okay, there's a great book called The Patient Will See You Now, which is talking about the reversal between patients, like the doctor-patient relationship, or the healthcare versus patient relationship, and it's talking about how that's been reversed in the same way as it has in many areas of customer service, for example, that now buyers have a lot more power. If you're going to buy a car, you go off and do all your research beforehand before you go to the car yard, whereas previously the salespeople had all the power. Okay, good. Let's see what's coming up in economic. Cost of keeping up with technology. Yeah, training of advanced machinery and tools. Health tourism becomes the norm. Absolutely. So this is an area, especially for us in Australia, where we've got really advanced healthcare facilities in Asia, where not that far away. So for us here in Perth, for me in Perth, in 3 hours I can be in 3 or 4 hours in Bali, 5 hours in Singapore, Indonesia, and these are all people which have got world-class health facilities, and so medical tourism is going to become, it's certainly growing, and it's interesting this person here says health tourism becomes the norm. Let me talk about another thing around social. So remember, this is all about people, so more and more. So hierarchy makes it unattractive to hire top talent. So top talent, especially like Gen Ys and Gen Zs, they have different needs from their workplaces now. And if you're in an established hierarchy that's done things the same way all the time and doesn't want to change and doesn't respect the voices of people coming into the system, then it's not going to be an attractive place for those new people to work. And that they may be the top talent that you actually need to lead you into the future, but you might be turning them away. Okay, anything else? Okay, so let me add a couple of others. Okay, actually we've got royal commissions. Yeah, okay, so we've got an aged care royal commission at the moment, and obviously that's going to have some impact into the system. Personal risk, safety, e.g. in ER. Okay, let me add another one here. Autonomous cars. Okay, I'll put that one in there because autonomous cars are going to affect almost every industry. And I put that in there without thinking too much about how this is going to affect private hospitals, but I bet it does. So I reckon there will be a private hospital. And in fact, okay, I've got a couple of examples here. Autonomous cars, we will certainly have self-driving ambulances. Okay, patient. Okay, imagine if you had a choice to go to a hospital that will pick you up from home, take you to hospital, and then take you home afterwards, and another one that didn't. Then that certainly might change where you go for your healthcare, all other things being equal. Okay, here's some others that have come in. More discerning users, customers, not patients. Yeah, litigious, so people are more litigious. So let me add another one under this one because that's sparked another idea for me. So we can have AI doing automatic, let's call it litigation analysis. Okay, Okay, so imagine if we had artificial intelligence that could look through the care that you received, and everything's going to be online, and artificial intelligence would then do a diagnosis based on all the data that you provide, based on some healthcare experience, compared with the data that other patients provide, and then say, well, you've got a potential case here to sue your healthcare provider. We're not that far away from artificial intelligence being able to do that. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Holistic wellness, less sick people. So I reckon there's going to be a big shift, and let's put this under social as well. A shift from healthcare equals curing sick people to wellness, which equals keeping people healthy. Okay, because you could say our healthcare system is really a sick care system. And what if that changes? What if that shifts? Okay, so this is good. I want to now show you this other little tool that when I do these workshops, I lay this second tool on top of what we've done so far. I can see a couple of questions that come in. So let me just check if there are any. Oh, okay. So Neil says can't enter things through here, but insurance costs go up. Okay, insurance costs go up, become more frequent. Let me do this for you, Neil. Fantastic. This is going better than I expected. Fantastic. So let me show you this. I just want to switch to, still based on this PESTLE analysis. I want to show you this other tool that at some point, so when I do this with groups, we do exactly what we've done here, and we do it on flip chart paper in the front of the room and so on. And at some point, I break in, just like I'm doing now, and I say, there's another tool that I want to show you. And it's looking at any one of those things that we've talked about that we put up on that ASCII hand board, like how likely are they? So we're looking at this other tool called scenario planning. And what we look at is there are certain things which are certain, very, very likely, and there are other things which are less likely. There are also things which are going to come up in the short term, and there are others which are going to be in the long term. And that, if we look at those two axes separately, we get these four quadrants. So when we do our analysis, when we do a PESTLE analysis, and we'll go back to this, we should categorize each one of those things that we've identified into one of these four categories. And in fact, we'll find things that we haven't thought about before, but now that we think about these categories, they might come into our thinking. For example, let me tell you the four categories now and give you some examples. So if they're unlikely, so it's a little bit iffy, there's a lot of hype around it, there's no real evidence for it, and we know there's a lot of work involved in it, then we can ignore it for now. So for example, colonizing Mars. Okay, so Elon Musk has his project to colonize Mars by, I think, 2030 it is. What's that going to do to the private healthcare system? Well, absolutely. Somebody is going to be providing healthcare for Martians, so the humans who go to Mars and the humans who are born on Mars. But it's unlikely, and it's a long, long while away still, so we can ignore it for now. The next ones are the things which are still like hype, but if they turn into reality, then they could have a big impact, and we should keep them on our radar. So they're things that we should think about, even though they're unlikely at the moment. So one that didn't come up yet on our PESTLE analysis is blockchains. A lot of people are talking about blockchain, and I think you should look at blockchain with a very, very, very healthy skepticism. A lot of the technology behind blockchain has been around for a long time, but we haven't actually implemented it. So you might say, apart from the fact that it's got a sexy name, why should we think about blockchain? And so that's my angle on it. But if people start adopting blockchain, it could have a significant impact on a number of industries. So I think this is unlikely, but but it could happen in the short term because lots of people are pouring a lot of money into it. Personally, I think they're wasting a lot of money, but I'm not saying it's a complete waste. I think it's something we should keep on our radar. There are other things which are a little bit further long term, but we know they're going to happen. And I think things like driverless cars and even flying cars fall into this category. We actually know they're going to happen, and there's a lot of issues and obstacles to overcome. But the obstacles aren't the technology. The obstacles are people being okay with it, governments being okay with it, changing our infrastructure to be okay with it. So they should definitely inform our strategy. And the number one priorities are obviously the things which are definitely going to happen or happening already. And so in other words, short term, and yep, they're definite. Okay, so let's go back. If we were to go back to a PESTLE analysis, and we did this analysis on any one of these ideas, let me go, well, you can do this in your background, of course, but let me go back to the webcast screen. So, for example, this black swan event is something which is unlikely. By definition, black swan events are unlikely, but if they happen, then they could have an immediate impact. So this is one of those things that you don't ignore. There could be a black swan event that you need to keep on your radar. Royal Commission, we know that's going to happen, and that's going to happen that's happening now. So we know that it's going to affect us in the short term. We don't exactly know what it's going to be, so that would fall into the category of certain and imminent. So we do need to take action, although we don't quite know what that action is. This AI doing litigation analysis, I can tell you this is happening in other areas. In fact, some guy, it's just some random guy, built an artificial intelligence app that will help you fight parking fines based on council laws and the fine you got and where you parked and so on. So this is already happening. It's just not happening at the scale and the complexity that's required, sophistication that's required for healthcare, but it's something that we should keep on our radar. So either keep on radar or maybe even inform strategy, because we know it's just around the corner. There's things like this new technology, Da Vinci machines, these autonomous trolleys, they're already here. They may not just be in your hospital. So they're definitely things that you should take action on. So as you go through this, and we're not going to do this exercise here because obviously I want to give you an example of how to do it. What you do is each of these items that we've identified, we then go through and classify into one of those four categories. And this sometimes leads to a lot of debate, and that's okay. That's okay. If you're doing this in a group, especially if you've got a bunch of senior leaders who all have their own areas of expertise, then you should debate this. You should decide how important are these things going to be for us. The danger and the trap that some people fall into is, if I can switch back to my scenario planning side, the trap that some people fall into is they only do the stuff that they can see and see in the short term. And I think this is a leadership failure. If you only look at things which you know are happening or right now or happening in the near future, and you say that's going to drive our action, then you create this very short-term thinking. So you do need to think like that local council that I was working with a while recently, where they said, we know what's happening. We've already got our plan for the next 5 or 10 years. Let's talk about 15 to 20 years. The other trap that people fall into is that they get now, which one is it? They get taken by the bright, shiny objects. So they go to this stuff that's below the line here. So this unlikely stuff. So cryptocurrencies, whatever flavor of the month, cryptocurrencies, social media when it first came out, we had the first that .com crash. So they look at whatever's new. Everyone talking about artificial intelligence, and they take that to the extreme. So I reckon artificial intelligence is very big, but for most organizations, it's going to make a big impact in 3 years' time, not in 3 months' time. And even then, it's going to make an impact in how are people and machines going to work together. That's a topic for another day. Okay, so that's the scenario planning tool, which you use to then overlay what you've done with the PESTLE analysis. The next step beyond that, now this is the third one, which I said we won't talk about, and I'll just mention it, is then you look at how are we going to, you identify the things that you do think you're going to look at, either for, let's go back, sorry, either that are going to drive action now or inform our strategy. And then you figure out, okay, how are we now going to incorporate these? In an ideal world, you just say, okay, let's adopt it. Let's take on autonomous cars, or let's take these trolleys in, or let's get the best talent. But that's not it's not practical and feasible. So then you assess based on each one of these, for each one of these things, you look at these 4 criteria. Is it going to completely replace what you do? Is it going to assist you in what you do? Is it going to elevate you so that you can then do something instead because it's going to take that role over? Or can you leverage it for something brand new? So we're not going to go through that, as I said, but I did want to show you that just as a little idea of what you then do to take this into action. Okay, so let me quickly stop for questions. Last questions, if there are any, come through. About the PESTLE analysis, about scenario planning, which I know we didn't do a lot. Okay, David said, certain and long-term shouldn't just inform strategy, it should provide budget for research and innovation. Absolutely, and that's what I mean by strategy, David. So it should be part of your strategy. Sorry, I should read out David's comment in full. It should provide budget for research and innovation today for long leads. Absolutely. And so it becomes part of your strategy and implementation, but it doesn't become part of your short-term action plan. So David was talking about here, certain and long-term. So these things here that I said should become part of your strategy rather than just get ignored. And that's the trap as well, that if it's long-term, people say, oh, I can ignore it for now and I can come back to it next year. But you can't do that now. Especially if you're in a senior leadership position, you've got to be willing to bite the bullet and, as David said, fund research and innovation in that area. Okay, so before I finish, I want to do this little puzzle here. Many people will have seen this before, but that's okay because I want to make a point from it. So let's imagine that you've got this empty pond, this lily pad, and it's got one lily in it. And what happens to the lily pad is you watch it over time, and each day it doubles the number of lilies in the lily pad. So the next day there are 2, the next day there are 4, the next day there are 8, and so on. And you notice at the end of 30 days, the pond is full. Okay, quick quiz question. So you can answer this in the question box. When is it half full? After how many days is it half full? Let me just pause and see. Okay, don't see any responses yet. Jim, that's correct. Okay, first correct response, 29 days from Jim. That's right. So it takes, it fills a pond in 30 days, but it's half full in 29 days because, the rule is that it doubles every day. So after day 29, it doubles to be full. So that's an old puzzle that I remember hearing, even as a kid. I think I first heard that as a kid. But the point I want to make is not so much the answer to that puzzle, which is like 29 days, but looking back. So let's look at from day 30, it's full. Okay, so green means it's filled up. Day 29 was half full, so that's the answer to the puzzle. The next day it fills up. But let's go back a few more days. So day 28 is only a quarter full, 27th and 8th, the 16th, 132nd, 164th. But if you look back at the start of the week, if I was looking at that lily pad in the pond, there's very few lilies in there, like 164th of the pond is full. And there's no way, most people would say, by the end of the week it'll be full, even if we know it's doubling every day, because we think that tiny little sliver is not going to completely fill up the pond in 7 days. And yet it does. And this is the challenge that many organizations and leaders face, that they are in this time of fast growth. Everyone's telling them things are growing fast, things are changing faster than ever before, impacts faster than ever before. But until they realize what exponential growth really looks like, it's easy to be lulled into a false sense of security. So you see this tiny little thing that's changing and you think that's not going to have an impact for us in the near future, maybe even until I retire and I don't have to worry about it. But exponential growth means that things grow very, very, very quickly, even if they start from a very small base. So that's just a last warning for you before we finish up. So as I said, if you'd like to get a copy of my book, Disruption by Design, we talk about, there's a section there about PESTLE analysis. There's one about scenario planning. There's one about that assessment for action. In fact, Neil has asked a question which I didn't get to, which is great. Neil says, great to do these exercises, but how do you best build the results in an action plan to make sure they happen and get regularly reviewed? Absolutely, Neil. That is the next step. So get the book. definitely engage me to come and help your team do that. I do keynotes at conferences. I run workshops with your senior leadership team, and also do some strategic planning. I've done quite a bit of that at the start of this year as people are looking ahead for the year ahead. But smart leaders realize that the planning doesn't have to happen only at the start of the year. It's something that you should be doing ongoing all the time. So if you'd like me to help you out with that, I'm very happy to do that. One last thing, one last little metaphor for you, and I use this at the end of many of my presentations. So imagine there's a whole bunch of grains of sand there, and I say to you, is that a grain of sand? And you'd say yes. Okay, this is not a trick question. If I said to you, is that a heap of sand? Sorry, not a grain of sand. Is it a heap of sand? You'd say yes, it is. So if I took away a grain of sand, would it still be a heap of sand? Yes. I could take away another grain, another grain, another grain. I could take away thousands of grains of sand, and it would still be a heap of sand. But you could imagine that near the end, when there's only a few grains of sand lying on the floor, the table there, you could say that's no longer a heap of sand. So my question is, when did it stop being a heap of sand? And I think it's a really interesting question, because there's no place where you can say, taking this one grain away, change it from heap to not heap. And yet, we know we started with a heap of sand and we ended without one. So that transition happened. But this is exactly what happens with disruption. Little things come along and pick away at the business, the organization, the team, the career that you've built up, and you think, oh, it's just a little grain of sand, it doesn't matter. But it's like the lily pad, those little things then very, very quickly amplify and accelerate. And eventually you'll wake up one day and you'll find there's no sand left. I don't have a heap of sand anymore. So just be alert to even these minor things that could have an impact on you, your team, and your organization. Actually, when I told this story once, somebody in the audience said to me, I know how we solved that. You concrete it, just pour some concrete over it, and then you've got your heap of sand. And I know he was saying that in jest, but I thought, yeah, he's absolutely right. That solution used to work. And it's exactly what many failing organizations do. They say, we've built up these assets, these resources, this reputation, this brand, these people who have been so successful for us in the past. If we concrete it, if we create barriers, if we create regulations, if we create ways to keep the competition out, then we can preserve what we've had. It doesn't work anymore. You can't concrete that heap of sand anymore. You have to be willing to be nimble and agile and flexible to be able to be ready for that future, and sometimes a future that you can't see. But I hope today you've got some ideas to help you see a little bit more into that future. So thanks everyone for coming along. Thank you so much for taking part in the activity, because it wouldn't have worked without you, and I hope you've got some value from that. Please complete the exit survey so you can get the complimentary copy of my new book, Disruption by Design. If you want to talk to me, please get in touch. You know all the usual ways, and we'll send a follow-up email to you afterwards as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.